we'll have this discussion.
Discussion? What discussion?
This is a discussion combustion.
Coming to you from Denver, Colorado, this is Discussion Combustion Podcast with your hosts, Kevin Batstone and Arthur Raw.
And then we talk all the time.
So are you.
So we're technically both professional talkers, I'd say.
Okay, got it. Okay, cool.
Which is fun, though. Which is fun. And now, did you always work in the field that you do now, or like what led you to your current career path?
So actually, I've kind of straddled two different worlds. I started working on Wall Street. I started working at Lehman Brothers back in the day, and I was a institutional trader and salesperson. And then I left because I wanted to start a company. I just knew in my heart that I just wanted to start something. That's all I kept feeling. And after about 3.5 years, I didn't really care anymore. And then I left to do startup luxury cosmetics. And I started with a pretty well-known brand. And then I was like second person on there, and then eventually moved. And about a year later, decided that if they could do it, I could do it with a friend of mine. So we ended up starting a luxury beauty company. We launched it at Barney's, New York, and it became an international brand. We had to leave that because that deal didn't go. And then I ended up coming back on board with my friend. She built her own brand and ended up doing that. But at the same time, I was born super intuitive. I was a kid that knew when people were telling the truth, not telling the truth. It always really bugged me, when I would say people weren't telling the truth, and just had that like intolerance of that kind of thing. And then eventually, when I was living up in San Francisco, at the time I was working at Lehman, I started having these experiences where I would see somebody on a bus bench and they would look me in the eye, and I would know their whole life story, every feeling they've ever felt, every horrible, tragic experience, how they were feeling in the moment. And it would take me a couple of days to shake it off. And then what ended up happening was I have what they call like the healing hands. And so if I would touch somebody's arm or their body would start like get your hand off my body, your hand's on, like causing my leg to feel like it's on fire, my back's on fire. And so then I started training.
When was the first time you like ran into that? Like when you like touch somebody and then all of a sudden, like, do you remember the first time and you're like a little like thrown off? Like what's going on with this?
Oh, I was like, what's happening? I really didn't understand, but I was being pivoted, if you will, by life, like time to leave Lehman. It was all happened around the same time. And so I just, then I started like asking questions like, okay, what am I going to do with this? And how can I get trained? And then I ended up training with one of the longest standing medical intuitives in the country. And she made me go and get additional training before she trained me. And so basically, do you know what a medical intuitive is?
I have never heard of that. I feel like I can kind of, so
You could probably wing it.
yeah, like you're in touch with your intuition. However, it's actually used in legit medical practice.
Kind of. So what happens is usually there's an understanding that with whatever disease or whatever chronic condition or ailment or personal, anything that's holding us back or that has us sick or unwell and in dis-ease, has usually a physical, mental, emotional, spiritual component to it. And so what happens with the medical intuitive is you can go and work across from a medical intuitive and begin to get a better understanding, like, how did I get here? What are the layers to my disease, my situation? And there's very specific ways that the body organizes life experiences. So usually before anyone gets sick, the body will throw warning sign after warning sign after warning sign. Like you're out of integrity, or there's too much sadness, grief, anger, frustration. When kids are
Those are like the warning signs.
Those are
Like
some of the big warning signs. So what happens is you have one situation after another, and you don't actually handle them. You don't communicate when somebody's being inappropriate or disrespectful or antagonistic or anything.
Mhm.
What happens is that the emotions that come up naturally as a natural reaction or response to how somebody's treating you or what's happening, it'll start to get suppressed into the body. And so the more that we have these experiences, the more the first of all, they get compounded and compacted in the body. And the body actually stores different emotions in the body. So lungs, for example, house grief, disappointment. This is also like if you could look at Chinese medicine, it's very similar. It follows along with the Chinese medicine. And so that's often the reason why people smoke because the smoking soothes the grief until you can deal with it. So alcohol is housed in the liver. I'm sorry, alcohol is housed in the liver. Anger is housed in the liver. And so what happens is sometimes when people drink, you get that really angry, volcanic drinker because the alcohol kicks out the anger in the liver. And then, you can also get the sloshy, lovey-dovey alcoholic drinker. And it's like the alcohol actually kind of soothes the liver and soothes the anger that's there. So there's just a wisdom and a hierarchy to the way the body stores energy and information. And the idea is that you want to eventually get to it. If you get hit by a life experience that's so overwhelming, an unexpected death, loss of a parent, even a massive firing, like if you get fired unexpectedly or you lose everything. And, it's like we kind of have to get our bearing and then we can actually start dealing with the emotions that actually were naturally coming up as a result of what's happening. So I never really anytime somebody sits across from me, it's like we always want to come at life really gently. Like, how'd you get here? If this is what's presenting, this means a lot of life has gone down for most people. Not always, but usually, there's a lot of life lived. And that's the first part is we want to just be really compassionate and curious, how did I get here? And now, what steps do I need to take to heal this completely so I don't have to come back here again? And there's ways to do that.
And it's generally probably not with like pharmaceuticals.
Exactly.
Like the healing is without that.
Yeah, we don't need that garbage. That's good. I like when we start to dive into. We had two gals on our podcast about a year ago, the biohacker babes. They went by. And it was a great show because we learned a lot about biohacking and doing things for the body that isn't necessarily what big pharma would recommend. For example, kombucha or probiotics or taking beetroot for high blood pressure, which I do, and just finding other ways to go about it than just falling into the big pharma system, which a lot of folks are, even on the mental health side, where they just kind of throw drugs at the problem and don't really address what's going on underneath it all. So I think anytime we can peel back the layers and make people feel comfortable to talk about what's going on, that's a good start.
Yeah, 100%. Sorry.
Oh, yeah, no, I mean, I agree. It's interesting because kind of what's at like the foundation of what you're talking about here is that our thoughts make this huge impact on us physically. And if we're not really paying attention to like our thought process or like not feeding our body or like the echo chamber of the subconscious or not doing that kind of stuff correctly, then you could get like all these diseases or, diagnosis of depression, whatever it may be. And it's the power of the mind, right? So I find that so interesting because I totally believe in all that. And I believe that the fact that I believe it makes it more true for me. But now hearing it back, because I've everyone can find backup, but talking to somebody that does this professionally and understands this concept is really interesting to hear about, for sure. So that's kind of like what I was thinking on what you were saying there is just the immense power the mind has.
It's incredible. We're just scraping the surface too, right? So you were laying out the timeline. You wore many hats. You were kind of on Wall Street, which I'm curious a little bit about, which we can get into later. Went into product design and then started to realize that, okay, I want to do something that I truly have a massive amount of passion for, something deep underneath it. Started to learn about all this. Where does the journey go from there?
So basically, I think part of what I found is like originally started working with people that had they kind of like bundled people. So I had a group of people that had autoimmune diseases, and I got to understand how does that work. I worked with a group of people that had cancer, and then suicidal addiction, very intense. And you begin to get a sense, an idea around and an understanding, not even just an idea, but yeah, an idea too. Because no two people are the same. So even if there's good information about biohacking and, you're strongly intuitive, you have a good sense about what you need and where life is pushing you. And it's really about you building confidence in following your own guidance and wisdom and information. So when I was working, I mean, I can remember the one time working with a person that had cancer, I could smell the cancer coming out of their body. It's very distinct odor. So, I was just a student then. I was just curious, like, how does somebody actually get cancer? And different cancers represent different things. So, I'm actually, I have clients that need to use pharma for their care, and that feels right for them. That's what their inner knowing and their, after talking to all the specialists and experts, like I'm more of the approach, like let's come in from all angles and let's check all the boxes off so that you don't have to come back and revisit this. You don't want people living in the rear view mirror, like wondering, is this going to come back or is that going to come back? Or, and we don't know. So it's not really about, it's just a curiosity. And so one of the things I learned was that what we do every day has a massive impact on our health, happiness. It impacts everybody around us. And so I really loved startup. I love everything about it. I ran sales ops. I ran all sorts of divisions and areas. And I used to work like 7 days a week with joy. I've actually always felt like I had such a good run career-wise. And so part of what I've pivoted to, I could be working more, I've had divine intervention training, very advanced protocols, but I was always looking for the cut to the chase because I feel like people are working so hard and so diligently and so much time is spent that, I don't know. I always felt I was always kind of a rusher anyway and wanted to get life on. So I was always looking for modalities that help people get off as much life as they possibly can in one shot. And that doesn't always work. If you've got a really fragile situation, then you're going to want to go a more gentle path. But for me, I really felt that my calling was to help people figure out, what are you here to do? What makes life so good, so rich, and so enjoyable that you just get up and you just love your life and you see how much greatness that brings to you. And then the idea with this tradition I'm working with right now is that you really fill up your own cup first before you spill out to anybody else. Like that's considered the wise woman way, or the great mother. Like we're going to hear a lot about the great mother coming. Like it's just a movement now in the healing world and at this time, because the way we're living is not sustainable. The earth is sending up warning signs, if you will. So Earth's going to make it and the Earth's going to be fine, but we just have to find ways to solve things and come together and solve things. So I get a lot of charge out of helping people figure out, okay, like what would your soul love to do now? 2023 was a bit of a rough year. It was tricky. There was a lot of, did you find that?
I mean, 2023, since 2021, it's just been growth years for me, a lot of growth years. So I wasn't impacted if that was like a universal thing happening in 2023. I mean, there were some challenges that came up as always, but
I mean, I lost a loved one in 2023. There's always gonna be some challenges in the professional world. So I think there were some bumps in the road for sure, but we're still smooth sailing.
Yeah. So, and part of it is that, we are always going to get lessons, and there's also outer influences as well. Some things that we start to feel more deeply or personally that maybe we wouldn't have noticed in the past, or just picking up on other people's stuff. Like the more intuitive you become, the more empathetic you are. It's like they kind of go a little bit hand in hand, or maybe you're just super, or I'll call it empathic, and you just like you walk into a room and you can feel, ooh, this is good vibe, this is good energy. That's another skill set that I think a lot of people are coming more into. And so they're beginning to recognize like, actually, no, I don't think I want to go in that room, or I don't want to go hang out there. And you just kind of pick up and move on. So a lot were, I think, more sensitive and more in tune than we've ever been. And so the idea is really trusting that and listening to yourself. So one of the things that I learned many years ago was that where you work is super important, and with whom you work.
When you're spending all this time doing it.
All this time. So what I didn't realize at first was that when you go to work, whatever your deal is, whatever you're bringing, like your emotional backpack, your personal backpack or briefcase, whatever you want to call it, like you can't just leave it at the door. The energy that you have going on inside is going to spill out into everything you do. And it actually impacts the company you work for, because there's actually a bioenergy field for companies. There's bioenergy field. It's like a blueprint also for your podcast. For any kind of project or venture, if you write a song, a script, a movie, a book, anything you create. So this might be a little bit out there, but it actually makes a lot of good sense. We're creative beings. We're energetic beings. We have an auric field that extends long beyond our physical body. And so everything we create has an imprint from an energetic like a bioenergetic imprint. So when I was working years ago, I was working with an executive of a company, and they asked me, why isn't this division growing? It's like, oh, I don't know. Let me ask. So I'm, super intuitive. I was born this way. And I got a response, and I was like, oh my gosh, like, what is that? And, remember in Lord of the Rings, the Ents? Do you remember that movie?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay. The trees, right?
Yeah.
It had a resonance like that. And it basically explained to me why it wasn't growing, what was happening at the company. And I was like, well, what are you? And this is a little bit out there for sure. It was like, oh, I'm the company. I was like, are you alive? And it was like, yeah, I'm alive. And I was like, well, can we work on you? Can I work on you? I was like, of course you can. So and I don't know if this is something you want to keep, but so what we ended up doing is working on the company, and somebody resigned the following week. Like that's how
interesting,
powerful. It's super interesting. So
you were like, you identified like so when you were talking about you were working on the company, like, was this through like a self-affirmation that you were doing, or like, and like you were kind of listening to like this company's energy, feeling this company's energy through like the intuitive network? And I believe all this stuff, so it's not super far-fetched for us here at DCPC. Like, we've been in touch and open to this kind of conversation, but basically you were in communication with like the company as an entity.
Exactly.
And then through this, concentrated thought process, that energy that you're putting into these, identifying the energy and this and that, then somebody ended up resigning from the company.
Yeah, but we just worked on, okay, so basically what happened was working on the bioenergetic footprint of the company. And so because I had already been taught to work on anyone, anywhere in the world, I was taught how to bring up, like, you basically can call up anyone. Like, I could be working on both of you right now as we're talking. It's the way of the future. I think in the future, everybody will have a corporate healer, because that way it just makes it easier, whatever it is that you're doing, and, making sure that there's a unified message and there's good branding, good marketing. It's like you're just clearing out the life that's happened. Could be from the very beginning when a company was created, that maybe a little something went down, or maybe there was a bad partnership, or it's just, in the case of the company, it's looking for when you do healing work. So it's interesting to explain it this way. You're calling up this bioenergy field, and you can conduct energy into the bioenergy field that's looking for the highest and best good of the company. So it wasn't like
And that's
working
like
on a
through
person.
like a meditation, right? Like you're kind of like, I'm trying to put it in like layman's, so it's like super okay, like it's easy to understand. It's kind of like I could see it kind of being like a meditative thing.
Exactly.
But, and you're being open to the company's energy, the bio energy.
Exactly. It's like there's a phrase for it. It's called distant healing.
Okay.
And that's basically, it's part of it. There's this experience of, since we're all in a unified field, you can call it up and just blow goodness, like, and put in restorative, nourishing, empowering, innovative, inspirational energy into this bioenergy field, and then let it do with it what it will.
Mm.
So
That
it's
reminds
called,
me a little bit of that. Sorry, go ahead.
anyway, it's just called distant healing.
Distant healing. Okay. So I'm trying to I'm a kind of a visual person. So I'm trying to, imagine you use one movie analogy, and I think of another, which is Avatar, when everything is kind of connected to the planet. I don't know if you've seen Avatar, the way the water came out last year, but the original one, like they would make connections, and it was kind of an energy base, and the way that, they would intermingle was through everything was connected through energy. And I thought, for me, I'm trying to picture it as to what you're trying to lay out for us.
I see this. Let me take another go at this thing here. So I believe like it's the subconscious network is like this database that everything is connected through. Like, and that's why intuition works, is because it's all part of like the subconscious database, right? And so basically what you're doing is you are like putting in a USB into like a computer and feeding positive energy into like this database, but not as the database as a whole. You're targeting one sector where energy is also being produced. So you're like targeting a different IP from your IP, right? It's
Okay.
like I'm kind of putting it together like that. No, but I've done things like this because some of this work that I've seen and I learned in The Power versus Force, The Hidden Detriments of Human Behavior, was a really impactful book for me. And the author about it talks about how they used to be able to do healing by harnessing certain essence within themselves on the collective level. And I know you're familiar with a lot of this too. So there would be people that would have mental health issues. And in order to help these people, he would just no communication, just eye contact with love and like acceptance in his heart and his thoughts, and just having that love and acceptance in your inner aura would share it with those people. And just by eye contact and having these type of emotions and focused energy on these emotions would help these people heal, and also get over like cancer and stuff like that. So things like this too. So I didn't ever hear about it though in like companies or entities having that like bioenergy. So that's pretty interesting. That's like another layer I've never thought about.
That's the juice right there.
But is that what you're talking about? Are we getting it?
We're trying to understand it.
No, you 100% have it. And so like, even if you look at a book like The Power of Eight, did you read that book?
Power of Eight?
I don't think
Power of Eight by
I've
Lynn McTaggart.
Is that the same guy that wrote Power Now or no?
No, different. That's
Okay.
Eckhart Tolle.
Shows how much I know.
Eckhart Tolle. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. I have not read The Power of Eight.
Okay, so so the woman that wrote it is a woman named Lynn McTaggart. And what she did was, she was a journalist or something, and she wanted to see if intention worked. If you could actually all get a group of people from around the world and everybody had a positive intention. I think one of the examples she brings up in her book is there was a high crime rate in Baltimore, something like that. And so she wanted to know if they could quantify, if they could actually measure it and study it and prove that intention itself, just the intention to make the world a better place or to improve sales for a company or whatever it is, if it actually worked. And they did a lot of research and a lot of testing around it and found it super impactful. You can get miraculous results from it. It's an incredible process actually to do a power of eight. I think they found that if you pod up people in eights, that eight, I think, I'm not 100% about this, but that 8 people in a pod seem to have an especially powerful impact because 8 is the infinity symbol also. It's also a very powerful symbol. So you have different books that have done it, or you have the quantum field. So, if you do quantum jumping, they say in quantum jumping, there's infinite, immeasurable possibility versions of you in the quantum field. You can actually swing out into the quantum field, grab an expert version of yourself that exists on a parallel, I don't know if parallel is the right word, on some other plane. You can bring it back in and bring that power into your life and learn to do something else or better do something that you're doing. So you're 100%. I love the computer analogy because I hadn't really thought of it like that. But basically, and I like the tree analogy. I love that first Avatar movie, like the tree in it, and just even the story they took us on because they, made sure there was somebody in there that everybody could identify with. And that was intentionally structured that way to take everybody on a journey. It up leveled our consciousness. Actually, that's a real structure. I worked for a company called Conscious Good, and they have a channel called See Good TV. So it's like the kind of channel, if you need a break after like a little Call of Duty and you kind of want to like get some good positive vibe movies, they aggregate those kinds of films that just, look at that look to up level our vibration. And in fact, that's kind of what we're talking about here is that, everything we do impacts our vibration. The food we eat, if we exercise regularly, meditating, mantras or positive affirmations, everything that you do, including and also where you work, who you hang with. Like if one of the messages I have for people is like, if you're hanging with somebody that takes down your vibe or just, I don't know, is always kind of like a little comment or a little jib jab. And, it's one of those things where that's impacting us. It impacts our wellness, our sense of self, and for good reason. People do it. Most of the time, what I found is that people take shots because of the deep disrespect of their childhood. So there's still some emotional maturity that needs to happen. If their parents weren't emotionally mature, their parents didn't, take responsibility, like they're having a bad day, and instead of taking responsibility, they've unloaded on their kids when they get home, or something along those lines. When we don't take responsibility and say like, hey, I just had a bad day. I am so sorry I just unloaded on you. And, please, take responsibility, make amends, if you will, and kind of clear that out. If we aren't around people that are really looking to see the goodness in us and are cheering us on to make our lives better. And, it's the kind of year where we might want to start paying attention to like who's upping our vibe, who's up leveling it, and who's not. And starting to make some good choices, and that also applies to work. If you're working somewhere and you go in every day and you're like, yeah, I like my job, but the energy of the company is different, or it changed ever since so-and-so took over. It might just be that life's telling you to pivot. Yeah, it was great up until now, but you're not the same person in 2024. You're not the same for all the work you've done, for all the podcasts you've listened to, for all the lives you've changed. Like when you look at what the two of you are doing, the ripple effect you're having is profound. Every time you post a new podcast, that ripple hits like 3 people out. Your friends. Like that's like one of the teachings they do in mindfulness. So you really begin to understand that just bringing that joy or bringing greater insight and awareness to the people that listen is having an effect on everybody in and around them, their families, their homes, etc. So the idea is like, how do you put more juice in the battery? What really inspires you? What's lighting you up? And, if it comes to work and up until this year, we can sometimes go down this path of like, yeah, but it was such a good job and I really liked what I was doing. And last year it was still okay. But, this is the year. I would say 2024 is it's an 8 year, and that's a completion year. So that means some things are going to come to an end this year. And that's okay. It's more like paying attention to the signs on the road that say pivot.
Yeah.
So could be like what you did is that you've got your day situations and then you pivot and start like a side gig, something like that. That's one of the options. That's one of the messages that comes through is that, we want to make sure that when life starts telling us like, hey, time, that we don't keep like our feet, like keep dragging our feet in the sand, if you will, or, we just want to start to pay attention to the signs. And what are you noticing this year? Like what is coming, what's naturally coming to an end? So like, I can give you a good analogy. It's like, if you look at the apple tree, which apples have fallen? Like, yeah, we're done. We did that. We've learned that lesson. We've experienced that. Or, this, I feel like I know that experience now. I don't need to keep revisiting it. It's like, it's really an important part of the process to just ask again and again, like, now what do I need? Now what lights me up? It's springtime, new time. Is there a new sport you want to try? Is there a new some? This is about like, we need more and more people living their best lives. It just will make it better for everybody if more and more people absolutely love what they're doing every day. Such a huge difference.
So true. So I have a question for you, being as in tune as you are. And I'm going to reference your analogy of like people have to refill their batteries. How often do you have to refill your own battery, right? Because I'm sure that there's even moments where you realize, oh, I could be more diligent, or I haven't been as diligent. When was that? I mean, do you experience that? Like, what does that look like for you?
Well, I'm launching a new program in April, and one of the messages I got was that I needed to fill up my tank. And that's what winter is. Usually winter is a time of, you want to lean in, you want to take it easy. We're supposed to actually relax during winter. We're supposed to rest and sleep like the animals. And so what I found was that I changed my diet. I went on a super highlight diet. That was really important for me. I started like lightening up and mostly eat vegetables right now. And that might change. I might start wanting to eat more meat or something in the future. But, I started this morning practice before I actually get rolling, where I just give myself a second to like, just to feel this love coming in that just fills up my cup, and give myself some time to like not put out as much, because I'm always feeling like I want to give and do. And that's just my natural way. But taking care of ourselves has to be job number one, in my opinion. That's
you
my
call
opinion.
that like the mother movement, or like what was it?
The great mother.
Healing. The great mother. Yeah. Well, I mean, and like you said, you got to fill up your own cup before it can spill over. And I think that's a good, point to echo as well. And kind of going back to what you were saying about analyzing, is this job right for me? The people that I spend my time with, all those things need to be analyzed a little bit, because, I talk a lot about Complacent Boulevard on this show, and it's an easy place to be. It's a nice, cozy, smooth paved street. It's pretty, it's easy. It. What's that Bob Seger song, Down on Easy Street? That's Complacent Boulevard, right? So making those decisions are hard for some people, I feel like, to maybe 86, somebody that's negative out of their life, or whatever that may be. Those are tough decisions to make. So I guess it's like when people ask me, Kev, how are you just so this way and, black and white, no shades of gray? That's just kind of the kind of guy I am. But at the same time, I still balance, because there's people that maybe I wouldn't choose to spend a lot of my time with, but they still get value out of maybe my presence. So how much of that do I need to analyze of, I don't want to completely 86 this person because maybe I'm impacting their life a little bit. Maybe they need to hear me today.
Oh, I'm in agreement on that. I think the one thing we want to just talk about is, it's okay if this thing needs to go, it's okay too. We don't have to yeah, some people need 86 people in their lives. If we could be honest, there's some people that are hanging out with people that are just not bringing out the best in them. And sometimes that's a good thing. It can be sometimes, especially with family. Sometimes I notice that family says things and I think, why would you say that? You wouldn't say that to your friends.
Mm.
You wouldn't say it at work, and there's sometimes this permission to be not so cool. So I think in those cases, we just want to make sure we're speaking up for ourselves and just being authentic with like, yeah, no, that's not cool. Hey, don't say that to me. Or I don't know if you realize this, like, you know, we don't have to be jerks. We just be straight. And that's the cool thing about being black and white with no gray is that people know where you stand. If you cross the line, you're going to say, yeah, no, you're just going to call him on it. And at the most, sometimes the best advice is actually just to start listening, start paying attention, start noticing like, wow, I hung out with that person and used to really have fun and I just don't anymore. It's just, it does come down to choices. And sometimes, that quiet and that silence that takes place when you stop hanging with somebody might be just the silence and quiet that they need to suddenly realize like, gosh, nobody's really hanging out with me right now. And, the only message I have is that at a certain point when I was saying in the beginning, like, experience after experience where you have difficulty after difficulty and people can have very difficult lives. It is real. This is no joke of a life experience.
Sure.
And, at a certain point we might just get to a place where we're like, I don't want to feel like this anymore. I just can't take it anymore. And sometimes that's what it takes is then you start, going to yoga or you start taking a run every day or you start listening to this podcast or, it just depends. Sometimes it's the smallest, tiniest things but it's everything. It's just that inner decision. And you probably both know it really well. You make that decision and you're like, I'm not doing this anymore. I'm not going to feel like this. And that's the key thing is that some people have had such a rough hand dealt to them that, they could spend their whole life suffering and just not being in a great place. And people would be like, yeah, I get it. If you knew his story, if you knew what she went through. But this is our life. We want to live our best lives and we want to do what we love and enjoy and do the things that only we can really do. Like we each have a gift to give and many gifts for some people, they're really here to impact a lot of lives. So, like one of the thoughts that I had when I was thinking about your podcast is, there was this software company that it was called Circles or something like that. And they started having people, you would do it was almost like a power of 8. Like you could pod people up in 8 and one person, or you could probably do 10 or whatever number you decided on. And, what would happen if maybe your community decided that they wanted to start circling up and, maybe just have somebody they could talk to about it. It's like they're listening to what you're talking about and they're feeling it. But maybe, I notice in my community, I have a lot of young people, they just don't fit in. They're so they have this heightened sensitivity. They wish that they could better relate to people around them. Or if they're going through changes or they're trying to figure things out, or they maybe want to go talk to somebody or try some kind of a therapy or try some, people are like, I don't know why you would do, it just doesn't fit with where their friends or their community are at. They do need somebody. I can see that being a real extension for the two of you and creating like a thriving community where people can, have company, have connection. Like, I talk a lot about like there are some real post-pandemic pandemics, and one of them's loneliness and isolation. And people are really disconnected.
Well, and it's really it's uncomfortable when you're in that position too. And like, you're kind of just dealing with it and you're not enjoying life. And, it's just like, and what's the point? But here's the thing is like, when you're in that mindset, you're going to perpetuate that mindset. And so at some point or another, like what you said, like you have to hit your own breaking point, and that's different for everybody. And then you have to get uncomfortable. And that's really the thing that like I think is most important is you have to get out of your comfort zone in order to actually get into a change. And not only like, because people have these ideas, and we've talked about this a bunch on Discussion Combustion, but people have these ideas and they want to try to do stuff and they want to make a difference in their life. And then they go to start this endeavor, and then they quit 2 weeks in. They quit 3 weeks in.
Yeah.
Because they're like, they want to get back on complacent boulevard.
Right.
They want to put cruise control back on and have it easy going again. And the thing that's made the biggest change in my life was constantly challenging myself, getting myself uncomfortable, and seeing what I am actually able to accomplish. And I did that by filling my own cup first and focusing on my own needs, which I totally agree with what you're saying. Yeah. So it's a lot of important lessons there, but it's breezed over so quickly. And like, yeah, the gray sucks. Like when you don't see color in the day, like that sucks. But you know what? You gotta deal with the suck for a little bit and stay dedicated and actually committed to it before you're gonna see a change. How many years did it take you to get to this worst bottom pit? How many years did that take you? Well, it's probably gonna take you about the same amount of time. Maybe if you're really accelerating, maybe a little bit less to get out of it. Right. So that's really the advice I would want to put out there.
Yeah. And I agree with that. And to piggyback off that, because we were kind of talking about some of the younger community as well, Sue, and, especially folks that, went through high school during the pandemic from their house and not having to, senior year experiences of prom and stuff like that. We're kind of really seeing a lot of the effects of that now on the mental health. And then of course the Zooms and FaceTiming, all those things offer tremendous value in business and family and stuff like that. But at what point has it gone too far? And it's making a huge impact on social interactions. So, these kids now are kind of growing up in an instant gratification world and seeing overnight TikTok stars. And there's a lot of other variables now that, Art and I didn't have to deal with growing up, certainly, that now they're faced with. And so having social interactions have changed so much, and it's like, that's a tough one because that's all they've known that since basically they've been old enough to walk, they've had some sort of device in their hand. And so that's where it's changed a little bit. And then, on this side of it, as podcasters, we're trying to motivate and influence, but at the same time, they're still looking at us through the same thing that I'm criticizing. So it starts to kind of get a little weird on how I try to present it.
Well, and the other part is like, what I always say is like, if you're going to be uncomfortable, might as well be uncomfortable having the stuff come out. All the guilt or the shame or the discomfort, the anxiety. Like some people are so anxious now that, trying to sit and meditate or trying to calm their inner self, like it's too tough. So first step might be like going out for a walk or getting a trainer or whatever. It's like, you kind of have to deal with it, as you just said, one step at a time, and that's one of the things is like anxiety is really high right now across the board. And, we just have got to deal with it. That's why, I keep kind of saying like, let's more people that kind of are touching on this and bringing this to the greater audience's attention, the better it's going to be, because we want people to enjoy their life and have fun. Even fun is so underrated now. It's like, I feel like, it should be so central to our lives. And now it's kind of in the back seat somewhere after, COVID. I mean, I work with kids, and during the pandemic, you had kids so worried that if they picked up COVID, they could give it to their grandparents or somebody who was vulnerable or whatever. I mean, that's a really heavy burden for any young person to carry. So it's like, how do we also lift that out of everybody, So there's lots of different ways to bring change. And that's my biggest message is everybody in your audience has an incredible change to make, has a gift to give. It might be to inspire people. It might be you have like some of the best merrymakers in your community, and their job is to like just start bringing more and more fun every day to everybody in their life. Bring back some, sense of humor. I feel like people have lost their sense of humor too. It's like I was on a call the other day. The guy said something super inappropriate and hilarious. And I just watched everybody's face was so straight. And I was like, oh my God, that was so funny. But, it's like, come on, it's time. It's time for a change to happen. And, I think that one of the things that we can do actually is, I want to talk a little bit about maybe some exercises. Like if your audience is out there listening and they're like, well, I want to know what I'm here to do. How would I do that? How would I find out? It's really true. We get messages in 1,000,000,000 different ways. I heard you all talking about angel numbers. Sometimes you look at a clock and you get a message, or the clock says 111 or 222, or, something like that. Or, you know, messages can come on a billboard. It can pop up as a video in YouTube that just like, boop, like answers your question. And all of a sudden you're like, oh, that was for me. So one thing I recommend is like, if let's say, your audience or you regularly exercise, you can just set the intention, because intention's a big part of how healers work. I'm calling up this company. I'm calling up this individual that's on the other side of the planet that's got a real situation going down. They've called me to work with them. There's no limits to what can happen. It's very powerful. Healing's very powerful, and so is intention. And as you've pointed out, mind and thoughts. And like when somebody really has a momentum, like I'm changing this. I'm doing something. I'm not going to do this again next year. I'm going to figure it out by the end of this year. By December 31st, 2024, I'm on. I'm going to have it figured out and I'm moving forward. Like that's powerful. So, you can set an intention when you go out for a run. Just one thing I need to do today, one thing I need to do differently this week that moves the needle on me being of service, or me living my best life, me doing what I really want to do all the time, full time. One thing, and then you kind of let it go. It's again like the way of the great goddess, if you will, the great mother, but not great goddess, great mother is it's like you don't have to try so hard. It's like the balance that we're looking at is gonna be a huge, as I said, a major theme that's coming up, is that what's missing in society is that we're not getting enough wise counsel. We're not taking the time to like, how would this really solve this problem for us? And then based on wise solutions that are pragmatic and make sense, then we take action. That's really what the balance is that we're looking for. So what you're learning and what you're doing right now, both of you in your different ways, is like finding out, how do I get my own inner aha? Or, like there are neurons in your gut. There are neurons in your heart. So there's a knowing in your gut. It's not just gut instinct, it's knowing. So it's like your gut starts saying to you like, I don't think I'm going to do that anymore. I think I'm going to get a different trainer. I'm going to go, actually, I did that for the last 3 months. I need variety. I'm going to go work out with this group. It's continuing to identify more and more of your inner tools, because everybody's got inner tools. Every single person, everywhere. So that's kind of the idea. So you can set an intention. Like I like any kind of like, especially people who swim or run or bike or do rigorous, like any kind of rigorous exercise where there's a lot of regular repetitive, like the breath work. It just clears everything. It clears the palate. So all you're going to do is you're going to clear it, and you're just going to be like, let's see what I get. Let's just see if I come out the other side. I might have a great idea for a movie. Maybe one of you has a movie in your mind.
One that I learned from Kevin here was look, you might not know what you want to do. You might not know what like is actually your purpose. Like, let's say somebody doesn't know their purpose, but you sure as hell know what you don't like. And that's one that Kev really taught me a lot. Is that, you start just removing things that you don't like in your life. And then all of a sudden what's left are things that you actually have value. So I think that's a good lesson too.
That's an excellent exercise.
So the intention of just cleaning out, I'm just going to clean out all the things I don't like. And another piece of advice I got from one of my other friends is, when you have started seeing success and you are elevating your life experience, you're going to have to change specific things, because what you did to get you to the level that you're at now is not going to work to get you to the next level. Right. So you can't I hate to say it like this, but to me, it's the truth, is like, there's no finish line. Like when I die is when it ends. And like, that's the commitment that I made to myself. when really focusing in on my health journey. And like that one was tough, right? Because it's like, oh, I have to stay diligent every single day for the rest of my life, and like, sure, I have some skip days. I have days where I lose my patience. Just earlier this week on Monday, I completely lost my patience and like hammered some stuff into oblivion. And like, I like just kind of lost my cool there. And it happens, but I was able to recognize it. I realized how I could have prevented that in the future. So we're all susceptible to slip,
Allow the slips.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, so when we set the bar too high, that's one thing I learned. I still, deal with anger management to this day. That's probably been one of the most difficult things to overcome in my life, which is funny because it ties into alcohol. And you mentioned the liver, and that's a whole nother story. But, that's something I have to be conscious of every single day. And it does creep up, and it creeps up, and sometimes, like Art has a good quote, choke that demon out. That demon's going to knock on the door, and you're going to let it in, or you're going to say you're not welcome here. And so it's a constant battle, of course, every single day. So, it looks different for everybody, I think. But the important thing is that you've hit on, Sue, and I think that what we try to do here is just to constantly bring awareness to it and have conversations about it, normalize it, what works, what doesn't work. You could kind of said in the beginning when I was talking about biohacking, like, great, if that works for you. I think the important thing is knowledge is power. And we've, succumbed to maybe just tunnel visioning on one thing where it's maybe better to look at all the opportunities on the table. That's one of my big takeaways from this conversation.
Yeah. And I think even with biohacking, like, the great thing is that you have people that are experts in that do a ton of research. I love those people. I'm always like going online just
Terrific.
to get like, what do you know about protecting cognition or, long-term health, or I'm a fan of all of that. It's the idea is that they're going to give you all this information and you're like, you'll know which one, like, oh, that's the one I want to start with. You just have to, sometimes it's just one thing you do that's different. The other thing is there's a great book called, it's called The Presence Process by Michael Brown. I recommend that book 1,000%. I've done it 5 times. One time I had to do it for anger. I just had so much anger, and I have kids, and I didn't want to be the mom who was, constantly unloading on my kids. So I did the only intention I had was to address all of the anger that was there for me. And it's a 12-week process. You read the book. He explains it really well. He had like cluster migraines or something like that. And they, his doctors were like, we have got nothing. We don't know how to fix it. And I guess he couldn't go on any more meds, or I can't remember. So he eventually unpacked it and got rid of it. And then he wrote a book called The Presence Process. The only thing I would say on that book is like, it's intense. So if you do it, do it with somebody else. So you have an accountability person who's like, bro, it's the book. It's like this, it's the process. It's setting you up. It's like, that's part of their phrasing is that their setups and whatnot. Because what can happen is if you can unpack all the way down to its root cause, there's no more, the anger that will arise going forward is appropriate. And anger is a great response when it's appropriate. It's whenever people have an inappropriate reaction or response to things that we start going like, okay, there's something else. There's some previous life that's impacting. Like when somebody goes crazy on you, you're like, okay, well, I just got my blinker on. I just turned a right. I don't know why you got to get so upset about it. Like, it's like, we know the difference. We don't even need to go any further on that. But the idea is that you can unpack go all the way down to the root cause. And then those buttons go, and then suddenly you're like, God, I'm not noticing as much anger coming up now. In fact, I just feel lighter across the board now that I've gotten all of these different layers out of the body. It can all come out. That's the great news. But you're right. It's like you are not going to feel super comfortable, but you might as well be uncomfortable with it coming out than being uncomfortable trying to keep it all shoved down.
Yeah, just let me just sit here and deal with feeling uncomfortable every single day, or I could get slightly more uncomfortable and start, taking the proper steps to make that impactful change. Yeah, it's crazy. So wait, do you believe in reincarnation? Do you think that's real?
Well, I'm somebody who can see on the other side. So I can't stop it. So there's just people that are wired like that. So for me, it doesn't make sense. This is my logical Sue telling you this. It doesn't make sense that I would be expected to get it all in one shot. even though I feel like I've slayed the dragon this lifetime kind of thing. I just think somebody's got to be the dark character for somebody to be the light character and vice versa. And we play these roles for each other. And I just see my experience with God and it's been so forgiving and so caring and I was raised in a very religious household and I was a lot of woulda, shoulda, like heavy. And that's not my experience. It's like, yeah, I'm just doing my best job. And I think that I just think that there's got to be a way for us to be able to come back and try it again.
Mhm.
And I don't think you're necessarily like, okay, ding, you cross over and boom, next week you're coming back in. I think you have got to take a little bit of time. I'm very interested in all of the work that Dolores Cannon has done. I don't know if you know her, but she
Mhm.
really explores that subject. She's got some cool books, some really out there books where even for me, I'm like, oh, I don't know about this. Because I just like to stay in, like, I like the stuff I like. But she's done some really interesting, and she's no longer, she passed away, but she just seemed like a tough bird from like Arkansas or somewhere. I don't know. But if you listen to any of her stuff online, I think she was just exploring the subject. I think they stumbled on it. Her husband was like in the military and he was trained by somebody in the Philippines or something like that. And she started doing this work and then I guess, he got in an accident and she took it over or something. But her work is so interesting. And after listening to her, I don't think she was trying to sell anything. She didn't
Mhm.
seem like oh, and get my program or go buy my books. It's like, even recently I think they're still publishing some of her stuff is the point. And so I just, I don't see, my experiences of a very forgiving and loving and supportive God. And yeah, so it just doesn't make sense. I can see how maybe how that narrative got removed from the larger conversation, but that's not my understanding. That's not my experience.
Hmm.
So that's my answer to you. Yes, I do believe in it.
Mhm.
And
But
if
there's
it's
definitely layers and conditions. Um, yeah, I don't know because like I do, you know, what we're physically made of has always existed and will exist in another form. Even when we like, do our business, like we're passing this stuff along and like things are happening, but we have this like mental energy and biospheres and all this stuff that what you're talking about. That is an energy and where does that go when the physical is gone? Where is that mental energy? Where has that went? Has that went into another life? Even if it isn't human, another essence of life. Has it, went into like I don't know. There's a lot. It's a curious subject to me, and that's why I had to ask you that question because I was just, I knew you'd have some sort of opinion on it.
okay, can I say my teacher, the one I referenced in the beginning, she explained it to me that the soul is what comes from God, and that gives us our co-creative power. And that soul is only like 2 ounces, is what she told me. So you need a physical body on a planet that's governed by gravity to hold down to house the soul. So my understanding is like I really am somebody who can see things that might not be visible to everybody's eyes. And it's not it's not something you just shut down. I think I shut it down when I was younger, but it's back on.
Mm-hmm.
So the way I see it is that people go into soul form. The body goes, we leave it, at the cemetery or at however, and then we go into a state of grace and we get a chance to like, how'd I do? How kind was I? How generous was I? How forgiving was I? How much making amends did I do, for all the people I hurt? I think that that's the currency. I think when all is said and done, from what I understand and what I know, and I can tell you one thing, I used to meditate every day for weeks and months and years. Like I was super diligent, almost like a monk for many, many, many years. I would just sit quietly. And when I could, I would just sit in silent meditation. So I'm not an expert. I'm not trying to pretend like I'm not trying to be an authority on anything. I just know that there seems to be a state of grace and we get to actually see the goodness that we brought forth. And then we learn also like, okay, well, I didn't do so well on that. And okay, lesson learned, or would I need to do differently if I were to come back? I don't think you have to come back. I think it's more of a choice.
And
I
so
would agree with that.
could this be like my first life, or like has, like what if this was a no comeback? This was just the first go or something.
It could be either.
Is that
It's hard to say.
yeah.
It's always one of those fun conversations because it could go a couple of different ways, but I kind of agree with all the points that are being made. I think it is a little bit of a choice. You pop in the DVD of your life at the end of it, you sit back with some popcorn and go, all right, well, I probably could have done that different, or go back and try that a little different. Maybe I'll drink a little slower in the next lifetime or something like that. That's kind of how I view it.
I think that's just the way I see it till now. So one thing, like when we were talking about exercises, so I was saying, like, if you're going to work out, setting an intention, what do I need now? What am I here to do? You can also do the same thing. You can ask for it also. Like, one way to get really good guidance and information, including answer to a question like the one you're asking right now, is like, is this my first go around? You can ask it like right before you go to sleep. They call that like the liminal state. So just as you're about to fall asleep, you set the intention like, hey, in my dream time tonight, I would like a clear message or answer to this. What am I here to do? Is this my first time around? Is this my last? What am I here to learn in this lifetime? Like, that's one of the services I offer. I do a personal deep dive with people. It's like, what are the lessons? What are you here to do? What would make your life at this stage so much richer and better? And because we want it to get better and better. That's the point of it. It's not like you're supposed to like some people, there's some good literature around people that they think they peak in high school or college. And you'll notice that they are always talking about like what happened in high school and what happened. And you're like, oh man, no, you got to lift off. You got your 20s and your 30s, your 40s, 50s. It's getting better and better. It's supposed to be. It's supposed to be easier because the more work you do, like the work you two are doing, the more you unpack that old stuff. Most of the stuff you're carrying is probably from family. Kids are light. They want to lighten up their parents. If your parents are having a tough time and you're a little a son or daughter, you will do anything to lighten their load. And so what happens is a lot of kids take on their parents' stuff. And so what you're usually doing by getting to like your most powerful, loving, engaged, excited and innovative, inspired self is returning or releasing that which was never yours in the first place that you took on. Now in school, you might get it from comments, or in elementary, middle school, like that's a whole other area, or from work. I mean, that's another thing I notice about work is like, sometimes people are just not cool at work. And you're like, who gave you permission to be a total jerk at work? It's like, that still counts. Like, you can set people up and be so cool at work, and you can also be so opposite of that. So I don't know wherever, I don't know when somebody thought it was okay or got permission to like not be cool at work, because people are trading their valuable time to go in every day for the company they work for. Like, that's a huge exchange.
It is.
So,
Well,
I mean, let's just say this. I'm just going to circle back. So you can do like intention setting before your workout. You can ask a question like, again, just how do I get my own answers? Okay, I'm driving my car. I want to know. Like, don't do it when you're driving, but I can do a quick exercise, and you guys can try this yourselves. So if you go ahead and close your eyes, I'm going to teach you. This is a lesson. This is a exercise in learning how to communicate telepathically. And that's how we get messages from the other side. Not always, but sometimes. So if you close your eyes, I want you to imagine that you just literally walked into your house and you walked through your front door to your bedroom. And I want you to imagine that you go to hopefully there's a window in your bedroom, that you go to the window in your bedroom. I want you to lift up the window. Imagine yourself lifting up the window right now. And I want you to look outside and see, especially if there's a garden or you have your backyard. but I want you to look and see if there is an animal that comes up near your window.
Mhm.
Like put your hand up if there's an animal.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Okay. So all I want you to do is ask the animal its name.
Mm.
And when you get the name, assume you made it up because that's the way mine works. It's always like telling us that we're making our stuff up. That's okay.
Frederick.
Okay.
A falcor.
Okay.
Mine was a rabbit too. I saw a rabbit.
Yeah. Yeah.
There
No,
was
I
a-
was thinking about a falcon
There was a bunny out
or
there.
like the hawk or something.
There was a bunny hopping in the grass.
Okay. Yeah.
Okay. Do you see? You just did that right there. You could literally do that exercise when you're just kicking it in bed before you go to bed, when you wake up. You could literally just imagine yourself lifting it up and like, hey, what do I need today? What am I here to do? You might get you might get one word, 2 words, you might get a sentence, you might get a visual, you might hear something. You never know. But the more you
Mhm.
seek, this is all about developing muscles, new exercising new muscles that are part of your intuitive, empathic selves, and just your commitment to bringing goodness to the world and really leaning in. And you never know how you'll get your messages. Might be one thing your friend says.
Mhm. Well, I will tell you that Kevin and I, in the first 3 months of this project, which is now 5 years old, the first 3 months of Discussion Combustion, we knew we were on something that could have an impact. And so we came up with a mission statement. And the mission statement for Discussion Combustion is to include anybody and everybody from all walks of life. So that way it doesn't matter who you are, like you're welcome here. And then we also want to be critical so we could ask difficult questions, but then we're also accepting and we're also loving. So we don't corner our guests. Even if we disagree with you, we're still going to accept that there's a disagreement and we're going to be loving about it. And with that mission statement, we have moved forward and continue that mission statement for the duration of this program. That's what it was. And I feel like that has made a big impact because we actually knew what we were doing, opposed to like if you're just going after something and you don't like have an idea of what you're doing, you're just doing, like, sure, you might be able to find it there. You might be able to just stumble across it. And doing something's better than nothing, regardless, even if you don't know exactly what. But having that mission statement, I feel like really helped impact the trajectory for how our interactions went with guests and how we treated it.
Yeah. Well, and just you're constantly reminding of why we do it too. Why we do because I can, call this work. Why we do the work that we do is because we enjoy it. We love to create. We love to be ourselves. Have these real conversations that not everybody gets to have, and hopefully someone that gets to listen or view can feel like they're a part of it. And that all that is kind of, speaking for me personally, is why I love doing this kind of stuff. Having these real conversations, because maybe you can sit down next to someone at an airport and have a fantastic conversation, which I've had tons of, but doing it in this light really, I think, opens up a door for a lot of other people to also get some value out of it. And for me personally, it's my calling. I love doing it every Wednesday night, and other nights of the week on other shows, and so I think that's a constant reminder because, even 5 years in, so we've had times where it's like, should we keep doing this? Do we want to keep doing this? Is it worth doing this? And the answer always, all roads lead back to yes.
Mm-hmm.
Well, let me give you a couple of tools so you can just have this for going forward. First of all, the two of you can set the intention to like, just imagine for a second, okay, there's a bioenergy field for our podcast. You can just put goodness into it. Like, just like imagine like the most beautiful, it could be a color, it can be good vibes, it can be whatever you want. Or like, hey, I feel like this thing wants to evolve now. Maybe it's time for it to get bigger. Maybe it's time that we actually send the message like, okay, we're 5 years in, we got a good rhythm, we know how we work. One of the biggest missions I think has been a theme and an important mission is bridging the divide. There's so much division, and there's people making money off the division in this country. It's horrible.
Mm-hmm.
It's like that, in my opinion, that's one of the things that, nice spam call. That's one of the things that we just have an opportunity to bridge the divide and to really give people a chance. Like, yeah, everybody's got a side. It's cool that that's your platform. Just to be loving. Like, yeah, there's differences. It's like, I'm not trying to sell anything here.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, it's like that's how I experienced that situation. That's how I was like, oh, okay. I'm just curious. How can we do something a little bit differently that brings, puts our arms a little bit more broadly around the world? How can we bring a little more comfort? How do we bring somebody in, especially people that are just like, I got to do something differently here. This isn't fun anymore. It can be such a drag, So, you can imagine like, put on your favorite album, best album of all time. Like that's a question I always have for people. I think to myself, I wonder what album has impacted their lives more than any other album where it was like, God, I squeezed all the juice out. I can't even listen to it for a while. It just completely up leveled me, my experience, like that kind of maybe put on the ultimate album and the two of you just get together and just like, boom, let's just put this thing in. And then let's just see how this thing wants to grow and evolve in 2024. You can do that. Like, let's say, for example, you're dating somebody and it's not going that well, or you're just like, everything you say something and it's like, boom, next thing you know, it's like they took it the wrong way. I'm just making this up. I'm just putting this out there for everybody listening. You make a salad. You could literally just put your hands over it. Just be like, okay, let's dial this back. I don't know, put something in the salad. Let's put a little goodness in there, a little zhuzh. Let's shake it up a little bit. That's not what I meant. Or maybe I was not in the best place, but it's not worth ruining the night or the weekend or whatever. Anything you set your mind to, especially when it comes from the heart and there's just, you put that love in, everything can, you can really bring dramatic shift and change. And that's in effect what you're doing in people's lives every day. And that's the cool thing, because the more you show up to you, that energy is in your podcast. That's what you need to, like, if I could just emphasize that to the two of you, all of your own, and the way you're so honest and the way you self-reflect and you choose authenticity, you're not trying, you're just like, oh, that's how I'm experiencing it. I'm just talking about what happened, what I went through, what I've done, or how I see it. That gives people permission to be so authentic in their daily lives. That's the cool news. We need more authenticity because there's so much, like you kind of said this earlier. What reminded me is like, you can find anybody to back up anything you say now. If you think something went down or this person's doing that, or this group is, there's so much stuff on the internet. Pretty sure somebody could back that up. So now it's like, what's real and what's true? And that's connection. That's being real with people. That's gathering up people like the way you are. And it's also
super exciting. I mean, Kevin and I have received these type of accolades before, and we're always just so humble about it because, it's we're almost doing this because we love hanging out and talking to each other so much as friends.
Right.
But it is always a great reminder, and it's almost like, there's like a responsibility now that we've built it, like there's like a responsibility to this almost, which I'm more than happy to continue to fulfill with you, man.
Oh, it's great.
But no, you go.
Just reflecting on the journey, because it's kind of cool that we're having this conversation, because we just kind of hit a milestone in this journey with, hitting 250 episodes. This is going to be episode 252. And we were kind of thinking about, what do we want to do for the next, we changed the logo. We're kind of switching some things up, same flavor, same awesome discussions, same authenticity. That part's never going away, but it's a good opportunity to reflect and look at things. And I think the biggest thing I take away from it is the networking piece, and the people that not only we've met, or the people that we've potentially helped, that have reached out and said, hey, I just need to hear that today. Sean Antonio comes to mind. We got in touch with him because we had an idea to get a chef on the show, which led to this, which then Sean gave us all these other great guests, which have now led to Sue. And I think that part to me is just incredible when you really tap into what it's not, what I get out of it, and what personally, the satisfaction of coming here and doing this and learning. I mean, I learned a lot tonight, and that's the other big takeaway. So I got to let all this marinate now, because I like to learn. I'll probably listen to this back. But I guess the point I'm making is it's good to reflect too. I like to reminisce. like we're going forward, of course, but let's not forget how we got here. And I think it's just good to reflect on all the successes and look at where it's going and enjoy the ride, enjoy the moment, because this was a fantastic episode. Flew by. I looked down, so we've been almost an hour and a half.
Oh, wow.
Wow. That's
Yeah,
amazing.
no, it is great. And free success energy. Everyone has free success energy because at some point in the past you accomplished something and you did something that you thought you couldn't. However, you've given so much great advice this evening, Sue, and thank you for that. But if you were to dial it in and give one piece of advice, just one piece of advice to help the entire world so everyone could be better tomorrow, what would that one main piece of advice be?
I would say make amends. I think one of the greatest gifts we can give each other is when we just say, hey, I'm sorry. I really am so sorry about how I handled it or what I said or I think it's one of the most healing components. I notice that people that are really still struggling, like maybe they didn't get it from a parent before they passed on, or, or just ruined a friendship. And if a little sorry or a little like, hey, my bad, I'm a big fan of kindness. And, the beauty of Sean Antonio is like he and I, we gather up every other week, just love life, just want to give people like, seriously, soak this up. It gets better. You can clear it out and move on and enjoy. But at the end of the day, like, I feel like a lot of people are hurting because they just didn't get that gift. And I've been the benefit of it. My dad was in AA. My dad was in AA for 41 years. And I'm like one of the luckiest people I know because he came back around and he just was like, I am so sorry. He just could not apologize enough. And that was just like all the healing I needed in many ways. Like you can't take things back, but you can definitely change the trajectory of what happens going forward. So that would be mine.
That's good advice, to make amends for sure. And I always like to say one of the greatest gifts you can give someone is the gift of your time. And so I want to thank you for giving us the gift of your time.
Yeah, thank you. Okay, so a couple things. I know this is going to end. So I did get messages for both you guys.
Okay.
I do that kind of stuff. So I'm going to text it to you. I think I have your numbers and I just probably need to, oh no, I know I have your numbers individually.
Yeah.
But I do want to just tell you too, you're moving mountains. I know I said that. I wanted to say it while I was on air. So hopefully you'll keep it and cut out the other stuff if it doesn't work or whatever. And it's really true about that company thing. I was like, it felt like an end. I was like, it was like this like slow moving energy. And I was like, what are you? I was so perplexed because if I speak if I get a message from a human, it's very, very like, it's lighter. It's like this is what's happening. This is why I'm not doing well. Or I might get a message from the other side. Hopefully this isn't going on. But the point is that when I got that message from the company, I was like, are you alive? Like I was so, what is happening right now?
Wow.
And it was like, oh, I am. I'm like, oh, can I work on you? And I was like, yeah, you can. So if that's too much out there, that,
No, I
and also,
think it's great. We're probably just gonna send all this because I think it's really
I think we keep it authentic.
Yeah, the authentic piece, and even when we mess up, we like to send it because it's okay to make mistakes.
Oh, absolutely.
Like it's all right to do that.
Yeah, absolutely. I think we keep it for sure. So which we will, and we'll chat a little bit more once we do close here, Sue. But before we go on air here, is there anywhere you want to direct our viewers, listeners, anything you want to include, social media, anything? We'll include that in the show notes as well. Any plugs?
Oh, okay. So people can find me at sueocallahan.com and there's no G. So, and I know you'll have that down in the notes. I also made it a point to go into branding and marketing over the past couple of years because I was always in all things business. But I just noticed that there were a lot of people that have really cool products and services and they can't market themselves and they're not telling people like just how much better their products are either making somebody's life or they're solving a problem or inspiring greatness or whatever. So I also have a separate site called Soulful Marketing and it's Soulful and then -MKTG. That's another one of my websites. And I do have a YouTube channel, Sue O'Callahan. I'm working on that right now. I'm getting messages on what people can do. I'm starting to post those this week what people can do to take care of the earth right now, even in a time when it feels like governments aren't taking enough actions and enough steps. Like, we got to take care of this planet. We have a responsibility. And, the more mature we become in life, the more we see that as our responsibility and just taking little steps. So I'm giving a weekly video to everybody just so that there's a sense of like, okay, well, I can do this and this is going to have an impact. And what people probably don't realize is like everything you do, even the tiniest gesture of kindness, the tiniest consideration has a massive effect. That's something we aren't taught. And that is for real. So anyways, those are my social media. This is my little plug.
Love it. I love it. It's
and thank you
excellent
so
stuff.
much.
Mm-hmm. Oh, our pleasure. I mean, I can tell that your energy readings are through the roof through the Zoom call. So I couldn't imagine actually being face to face and like the impact that you have on people that you work with personally in the same room. Love what you're doing for humanity, and I'm really curious about this message. So yeah, we'll be staying tuned into our we're gonna stay in touch regardless with you, Sue. You're in our network, we'll get you back on in like another year or so. We always like to touch base because then we're buddies. We've talked already before. We're friends.
Yeah, and hopefully next time we can do it in person. If you're out for a visit in Colorado, get you on the couch over there.
We got a nice spot right here for you.
Yeah, 100%. And also, I didn't say this, like for people that know that they're here to make a difference, if they're interested in the course, I'm doing a beta test. So it's going to be an abbreviated version. It's called Set for Life. But there'll be a full year program starting the end of November, something like that. So that's also on my drop down at sueocallahan.com. But just giving people a heads up, like some people know they're here to do it, but they're just like, I just don't know what it is. I'm so interested in so many things. So just putting that also on people's radar. But yeah, we'll touch back. And then also, because we're friends, you can text me if you have a question and you're like, hey, I'm not feeling it right now. I'm having a tough time. I'm in a rough patch and I can't seem to find my way out of it. Send me a text. I'll take a look at it. Most likely I'll clear it out. If there's like a little energy pack that's right there, that's just like this old energy that's just stuck and it wants to hold on and it's got you by the throat or, has you in the heart and your heart just can't seem to open up, you just give me a text and I will gladly take a look at it and we'll clear it out.
Awesome.
Love
Sue,
that.
you're an epic person.
Thank you.
Yes. Super
All right. Well, listen,
epic.
thank you so much for having me.
Yes. Thank you for being on. Kevin, thank you for showing up on time.
Hey, great to see you.
You actually didn't beat me in today. We showed up at the same time.
Yeah, that's good.
Listeners and viewers, thank you so much for all the support. Please check out Sue and all the work that she's doing. Get involved, and we can make this world a better place together.
That's right. We're going to keep this train moving. We'll see you on Happy Friday tomorrow. Sue, thanks again. Be good to yourselves.
You deserve it.